Okay, my name is Goldingham. I used to work at the Perth Flight Centre. Here's a picture of the flight centre with a few jets. I think it was parking for about 15 or 20 jets, but that was the main parking area. You can just see at the back there, Perth Flight Centre. That was the building of the terminal we used to have. As I said, I worked there from 1989 to 2005. To be honest with you, they were the best years of my life. I loved going to work. It was a pleasure. You never knew who you were going to meet. VIPs, odd people, just interesting people, and we had a fantastic time. The pilots were such fun. People like Jan Endy, you'd know Jan Endy, fantastic people. I just thoroughly enjoyed going to work. This is my jacket I used to wear. Now, of course, nowadays you have to wear high-vis jackets and things, you know, yellow and all the rest. These were actually made for us. You can see here, if you can see there, this little snowflake. And that is actually 5 or 6 jets. Colin Weston, my boss, great guy, he invented that one, and we wore that, and then it's got my name here somewhere, Miles. But in those days we could wear black jackets. We had our passes, like that. But nowadays you've got to wear high vis, you've got the radio. Let's just go quickly through. He was born in 1944 and died unfortunately in 2007. Now the interesting story about his death, horrible. He died in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and he wasn't discovered for over a year. Now the interesting thing is when he crashed in a little crevice, and there were search parties out for him for 6 months, let's say, and they didn't find him. Yet they found loads of other aircraft, and they found 2 aircraft that were lost in the Second World War. So they did a really good search. But he was an adventurer, sailor, everything. He was just he was a crazy guy, but an adventurer, a true adventurer. Anyway, he came to us in a citation. No, I don't know, later on we'll see a Citation 10 jet with I think 5 other guys. They were the chase crew, because he was flying the Spirit of Freedom, which is a balloon. He did actually break the world record. He started in Northern and went right round the world and ended up in Queensland. Interesting fact, when he landed in this balloon, it took him 20 minutes. When he landed, it just went on and on and on and on. 20 minutes it took to stop. So, anyway, he did it in 13 and a half days, going around the world. 32,963 kilometres. The balloon registration was November 277 SF, so obviously the SF is Steve Fawcett. And the chase plane, which is a Citation 10, is November 377 SF. Citation 10, I'll quickly divert and tell you a little story. We had a demo flight one day of a Citation 10 coming to the flight centre, and we decided to do a quick demonstration up to Geraldton. So the pilots asked for a performance takeoff, so we were allowed to go over Pierce. We took off from Perth Airport and went straight up to 42,000 feet, like a, forgive the thing, shower of shit. It went, it just went, and I think it took us 25 minutes to get to Geraldton. Normally it takes you 3/4 an hour, but we did it in not world record time, but we just went. Then on the way back we came down by the coast, took us 45 minutes. So that's a Citation 10, so it's a good aircraft. Anyway, so Steve Fawcett arrived. He was a busy man. He was coming in at, let's say, 6:30 at night. We had to hire a car for him because he came off the plane and literally just waved to us, had his bag and ran into the car and off he went. He was very quick. In fact, he got a speeding fine on the way to Northern, which we had to pay for. But anyway, there was 5 guys. There was about 3 or 4 pilots. One of them is actually a French guy to pilot for Richard Branson. He's Richard Branson. So good pilots. There was three or 4 pilots, a cameraman, etc. They were in the chase plane, and we loaded them up the next day with fuel and water and catering, etc. And then they flew around the world. Oh, there's a picture of the Citation 10. There's a picture of my car I used to have. I used to drive airside and things. The back there is an Antonov. That was one of the biggest aircraft we dealt with. That's obviously at the international airport. So we dealt with everything from a single-seater aircraft right up to the Antonov. Now, this is an interesting shot. There are the actual crew on the plane of the chase plane. Now, you're probably all wondering what's inside the box. Here we go. Now, when the pilots got back from their trip around the world, they were only in there briefly before they had to fly off to Queensland. but they actually signed this globe for me with the names, their names, and the route that they took. So they went Perth, Sydney, Tahiti, Easter Island, Ushuaia, Rio, Ascension Island, Cape Town, Mauritius, Cocos Islands, and then back into Perth. As I said, the balloon flew around the world, and he missed Northern and obviously West Australia, and just carried on, and it was going so fast he landed in Queensland. So that's my story, that's the globe. It's a bit of historical interest, I reckon. I'm going to donate that to the Bull Creek Aviation Museum. About 9 o'clock in the morning, we had a business jet arrive with Norman on board, Norman Schwarzkopf, and Mikhail Gorbachev. He only died the other day. And another guy, René Rifkin, and a few other people. Anyway, remember the old Burswood Dome? They were doing an investment seminar there. I think it was back in 1995. And they did an investment seminar. So these guys turned up on this jet, these business people and the influential people. And they were taken by limousine to Burswood. I think the show started at 10 o'clock in the morning. And Norman Schwarzkopf, he did the first speech. He did a speech for half an hour on business matters or something, and then he went backstage, and then Mikhail came on, and René, and it was all a business thing. So, but the public don't know this. What really happened? He went backstage, and everyone thought, oh, he's having a drink backstage. This plane, we had to turn it round. I think we put a bit of fuel on, not much. And then he came in a limousine back to the flight centre. We put him on the plane, and then he flew down to Busselton. And then he got another limousine to Margaret River, and he was at the Lewin Estate for lunch. He had another meeting there. So he had a nice lunch there. Then he flew back, and he got back at about 2 in the afternoon, went back to the show, and then he was there for the 4 o'clock finish, and he gave another little speech. And everyone must have thought, the poor bastard, he's been stuck in the back there. Instead, he was at Lewin Estate having a lovely time. But there's some of the interesting people we had. Now, this is the other one. This is the other story. This is what I call a mystery flight. This is a very interesting flight. We used to have in the old days, we used to have a fax machine, and all the information came through from Universal Aviation saying, right, this is arriving, blah, blah, blah. So we had a plane. It was a 757. It was blue in colour, I remember, and it was called JetBlue Airlines. And it was an airline that was it was from America, and it was going to start up a new airline. It was going to do various locations around the world. At any rate, we were told it was coming in via America, Samoa, I think it was, and then in Cairns, and then it was going to fly to us. Due to arrive to us about 6:30 at night, and we waited and waited, and it was due at 4:30. That's right, and waited and waited. I phoned the air traffic control in Melbourne. They said no, it's on its way near Alice Springs. We've lost contact with it. We thought, oh dear, what's happened here? So we, and then suddenly it just appeared out of the blue. It came out of the blue. That's clever, isn't it? So it came out of the blue and landed with us. And inside this plane was, I think it was 19 pilots, and there's all these people on computers inside, and there's flight attendants and all these other people. And they said they were there just, looking around the world to various places to land, etc. So we had a lovely time with them. They spent about 2 or 3 days with us. They flew down to Esperance and Albany and Kalgoorlie. Then they went up the coast, went up to Bali, Thailand, and I think went up to China and then across China. And we never thought about it again until I read in the West Australian that they'd got to India and they were arrested. Why was that? It wasn't going around the world looking at it. It was a spy plane. The reason they went missing was they were going around Pine Gap and various places. They were arrested in India, and they had all this information. So that was the 757 incident. But we just saw it in the newspaper. Right. Okay. This is the other story. I love my work. Probably in about 2000, I was retrenched. The office changed, as Gordon will know, we changed to Darwin, to Pearl Aviation, and most staff went to Darwin. And I thought I'd be kept on, but they retrenched me, and I thought, okay. I had another business in New Zealand, so I went across there. Then they called me back and said, quick, we need you, because you know what goes on around the place. Oh, okay. So I went back just purely as a casual to help out, so I could work for other companies. So I worked for Ad Astral, Marumba, Hawker Pacific, and Pearl Aviation. So I was working for 4 different companies. So this is the reason why. This is It's a plane similar to what Ad Astral had. So I used to get up at 3 in the morning, go to work, open the doors at 4, and then we had sort of a flight. So this plane went up to, or another similar went up to Derby. So I'd load the plane, I'd load the passengers, get their weights, etc. Load the plane, maybe sometimes do a power start. Off they went at about 4:30. And then the captain used to call me back on the radio saying, right, we're going to land in Derby at whatever time. So then I'd phone Derby saying the plane's on its way. I think it was November Yankee Charlie, if I remember rightly. And he used to fly in there at a certain time. I just let them know the plane was going to arrive, and they would just let me know the airstrip was okay. So I'd call back to the pilot, everything's okay. So I had an Ad Astral shirt on, and then I used to take that off, and I'd take my Marumba shirt on, and I'd race down to Marumba. And then I would, this is Marumba's citation. So I'd work from 5 till 9. So he did a flight to Big Bell, Wiluna. This one, on that day, we flew whoever the Premier was at that stage. I think Colin Barnett, was it? We flew him up to Kununurra, so we got him off to Kununurra. Then I did I had my breakfast, cup of tea, and then I saw another flight back from Big Bell. Then I went to work, and then so I had to take this shirt off and put my Perth Flight Centre one on. So, as I said, we have lots of interesting people come in and lots of odd people. Now, the first flight I think we had was yes, here we go. There's a West Wind. Now, the Queensland Police Air Wing had one of those. So they flew across from Brisbane, and they parked in front. We refueled it. And then they brought this prisoner. Now, you've all seen Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs. You know when he's transported? Ooh. This guy came in with no shoes, shackles, handcuffs, and a mask. I never actually saw the guy's face. He was a vicious bastard. We were told not to go anywhere near him, and the police were there, and they just shoved him off onto this this private jet to get back to Queensland. But he was, don't know who he was, but he looked vicious. So anyway, that was interesting. And then we had Rod Stewart. Now Rod Stewart was one of our regular clients. He came in, nice guy. All I remember about him is in the back of the plane he always had a big net of soccer balls, because when he does a concert he used to kick all balls into the audience. Anyway, that's Rod Stewart for you. Nice guy. So he came in about 3 or 4 times. Oh, that's the interior of a Learjet. Now, this is a horrible bit of the day. It was getting to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was ready to go home. And then, of course, I was told we're going to do a medevac, a possible medevac up to Bali. Oh, okay. So I had to take these seats out of this Learjet to put in the stretcher and all the bits and pieces ready for a medevac. So I took the first 2 out, the third one, the last one, I virtually chopped my finger off. Just inside the gap there, and I was lifted. Oh, blood was everywhere. Oh God! So I was rushed to hospital, and I remember them peeling the skin back and putting things in. But that was a day to remember. That one. Now I've talked to Steve about this. There's certain things we can and can't say. I had to sign various things to say various things. When we did a medevac up to Bali, we had a little safe at work, which you can edit this if you want. We had a little safe at work with American dollars, and that was to pay off the people in Bali, the refueler, everyone, just to get everything moving. Because if someone's in pain in Bali, the Indonesians just used to say, yeah, go on. And they just expected money every time we went there. So we always had a little bit of stash. And then they got really cheeky. They didn't want the old American dollars. They wanted the new ones. Oh no, we want this thing. But that's, if you want to edit that, you can. So that's the Mystery Flight Investment Show, long day at work. Oh God, yeah, okay. Interesting story. We had a very wealthy American woman. We used to get these faxes in all these bits and pieces. We had a very wealthy woman come in. Well, anyway, we had a very wealthy woman who was on the QE2. She was at Fremantle, and she decided to cancel her trip because she'd heard that Reunion Island, which was the next port of call, had mosquitoes that gave you malaria and all sorts of diseases. And also she heard that Morocco, they didn't like the Americans, and so she decided to cancel a trip. So we had to organise to get her from Perth to New York. So what happened? Okay, we organised, this Universal organised it for us. So we had 2, I've written it down here somewhere, we had two pilots come from New York via Dubai into Perth with a flight attendant, and they stayed overnight. Meanwhile, we had the plane left New York and went to Hawaii with 4 pilots and a flight attendant. So they dropped the 2 pilots and the flight attendant off in Hawaii. The 2 pilots then flew from Hawaii through to Perth. The 2 pilots and the flight attendant who flew in from New York that way jumped on a plane. So the plane was just on the go all the time. And then it went back to Hawaii and then picked up the 2 that were there and then that did. But it cost $250,000 plus to do that. But this woman, there's only 2, there was herself and her personal assistant, who had a tiny little bag. But this woman, no word of lie, she had 21 Pierre Cardin or Louis Vuitton bags. 21. You know, she was on a cruise. There must have been dress balls and all sorts of things, but she was so wealthy she could do all that. So, but 21 bags. Oh, there's Bill Clinton with, I don't even remember Bill, the names, yeah. Bruce Glover, anyone? Bruce Glover or Frank Smith? They were our citation pilots. There's Bill Clinton. That's Leonard Cohen. Now, that's an interesting story in itself. He lives in Canada, or used to live in Canada, he did now. He lives in Canada. He did his concert, I think, on a Saturday night, and he couldn't get there was 50-odd backing singers and staff and bits and pieces with him, and he couldn't book a flight from Perth to Hong Kong because it was all booked out and whatever. So we had to organise a charter, and you try and organise a charter for 50 people to get out of here. So we actually ended up chartering a plane out of Jakarta, which flew down to Perth. We positioned it in Perth, and then it flew from Perth to Kota Kinabalu, then on to Hong Kong, and then they caught the connecting flight from there to Canada. So there was about 50 people, and my job was to make sure Leonard was okay. So we got him through customs with his manager first, and then I drove him and his manager across to the plane, got him settled in, made sure he had the best seat, showed him where the toilets were and all bits and pieces, and then when the bus came with all the other rabble, with all the backing singers, and they just piled on and took every, but he's a very interesting guy. I talked about the Isle of Wight Pop Festival and various things, so interesting guy. Oh, that's myself at the controls of an Antonov. Because, you see, when you're working with these aircraft, you can just be a cheeky bugger. If you've got your pass with you, you just walk on and say, I just want you talk to the pilots and things, so you can just do whatever you like. Fantastic. There's another shot of that Citation 10 and my car again. Another shot of the Antonov. Oh, questions. I've got more stories. Let me just see. I know people like little stories, what really happened and things. This is another one. I'm sure it's okay. Alan Bond's dead now, so it doesn't matter. But we used to have 3 of his aircraft with us. One of his pilots was a guy, Jan Endy, who's done speeches here before. There's a few stories that never surfaced, but they would have by now. But one night, Jan said, "Oh, we're off to Sydney." Okay, fair enough. And no one's meant to know where we're going. Okay, fair enough, just Sydney. They were away for a couple of days. Anyway, they got back at 2 in the morning or something, and Jan said, no one wants to know where we've been. It's all hush-hush, because it's all business, you see, when they're going around the world. Anyway, I knew where they'd gone, because Jan had 2 big cartons of Chilean wine, so that was all that deal with thing in Chile. What another story from that one. One of the guys had a heart attack as he was coming into Perth, and we were sworn, don't say anything about this guy having a heart attack. We organised the ambulance and things, because if anyone from the Bond Corporation, or the price of his shares would have gone down or something. Get his name out. Anyway, so that's Leonard Cohen, Alan Bond. Oh, that's right. When Alan Bond's daughter got married, they had the 3 jets go to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, let's say. And I think the one from Melbourne bought the wedding cake. I remember unloading that huge cake. And all these other VIPs came off the flight, and then the next morning I was at work, and they were all drunk, treading on one's right. My boss came up we did a flight in the Citation up to a place called Truscott, which is up near Colombaroo. So the plane went to Perth, Newman, Truscott. And my boss said to me, we need catering on this flight. Now Qantas would have charged $80 just to deliver sandwiches from the other side of the airport to the aircraft. So my boss said to me, well, you can drive your car airside. Do you want to pop in early in the morning and pick up the sandwiches? I said, yeah. So no problems. I came from home, went to Qantas terminal through the back gate, picked up the sandwiches and a couple of crew boxes of food, and so I brought them back to the terminal. So as the plane left, I put one lot of sandwiches inside the plane, one in the nose locker so they keep cool for the flight to Truscott from Newman, and then 2 boxes for the crew. Anyway, after a couple of days, the crew said to us, we don't need the crew lunches because we can eat the sandwiches, and when we get to Truscott, we've got to wait for the plane, well, the helicopter to take the crew out to Arafura Sea or whatever. So we don't need the sandwiches, the crew meals. So I said to my boss, Eric, I said, we'll just keep them going. Yeah. So we had our lunch every day. That's probably why I'm a diabetic. So, but we used to do lots of medivacs, mainly out of Bali. But I remember one was a sad day. We had a medivac. We had a Learjet coming in from Melbourne. He went Melbourne, Perth, and then he went to Singapore. And then luckily had another medivac out of Singapore back to Melbourne. So it was a dream run. Anyway, so we had some guy from Singapore who was dying of cancer, unfortunately, wanting to get back home to Singapore. So the Learjet was on its way, and the pilot called up and said, has the passenger arrived yet? No. And as I was talking, the ambulance turned up. Unfortunately, the guy died just as the door was opened. So pretty sad. And then his poor son was saying, oh, can you put him on the plane and take him back to Singapore with us? I said, no, you can't take a dead body on a plane because, for all we know, it could have drugs inside him. Well, you never know. So the plane came in, had to refuel and go without him, unfortunately. Then, as I say, went on to Singapore and then back down to Melbourne. But that was a sad day. But I've had 2 people die. There was another guy who came in from Christmas Island. He had a bowel problem or something like that, and he died just as the plane landed. So it's one of those things, and I've sent lots of people off to. There's one guy who had to go back to Amsterdam, and he was dying of cancer and had a thing in his mouth and his nose, and he could only have solid. He couldn't have solid food and things like that. What have we got? Search and rescue. That was an interesting one. I just finished work, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was called up to go to Learmonth. So I flew up I think I went up in a west wind, and then I caught up with a Challenger, and we flew out 600 k's out west of Port Hedland, out of Learmonth, to look for a Taiwanese iron ore carrier. And we went out there, and we did find it. Unfortunately, it was just the yellow iron ore coming up to the surface. They didn't have time to. They did a Mayday signal, and that was it. There was 24 people on board. So what happened, which changed the rules for these iron ore boats, because the iron ore boats were just single hull, and it was just hit a wave, and it was so heavy it just cracked in the middle, went straight down, and that was it. But now they've changed the rules. You've got to have double hull. Is that correct? Has anyone that aviation? So that's that. I used to have little deals going on. We used to have the jet going up to Darwin. I used to have Buffalo and Barramundi brought down with me, and another plane coming in from the eastern states. Ingham chickens. They used to fly into Ceduna, and I knew the guy. I used to organise the fuel. He used to chuck in 2 dozen oysters from Ceduna. They're lovely things. Other horrible things was the Bali bombings. We had people coming in from that. They were just horrible. Here we are, Greg Norman, yeah. Greg Norman, interesting guy. I did have another shot of a plane. He started with a small business jet, and then he went to the big one, and his registration was November 1 GN. Greg Norman, remember that? But you couldn't touch his hat. He was in a box. He had to touch. He unloaded it. No one was ever allowed to touch that hat. Likewise, his golf clubs, you had to be careful of them. But, shady customers, Christopher Skase, do you remember him? Laurie Connell. Nice guy was Lord McAlpine, do you remember him?
Yes.
He used to have that interior of that jet was Tango Papa Romeo. He used to go regularly up to Broome. Nice guy. I've got a picture somewhere I can show another time with my boss with a helmet on, a diving helmet. But he's also an interesting guy because he had that Broome zoo, didn't he? So he used to send up bits and pieces. And his chauffeur drove a Jaguar car, and he drove it up to Broome. Lord McAlpine would fly up in the Learjet, and he would drive as quick as he could up to Broome in the Jaguar. So he had a chauffeur limousine just around Broome. Suspicious one, this one. You can edit this one as well if you want. In the back of some aircraft, if it was a government aircraft, because it dealt with prime ministers and ministers and things like that, when they came in from overseas, there'd be a box, and you'd have a cover on it, and you could contain anything. The thing is, it's diplomatic immunity. Did you know this at all? Yeah, so you just wonder. I remember we had a plane in from Botswana, and we customs took the guns off the security guard. We want our guns, but they wouldn't let them. They got rid of those. Completely different. I just thought about this last night. I got married on the 1st of December 2005. My mum and dad got married on the 1st of December 1945. 60 years between us. Anyway, our honeymoon was, first one, I had 2 honeymoons. The first one was to Ayers Rock, so that was pretty hot, 40 odd degrees. Second one was to Antarctica. I did a cruise from Puerto Monte down to Antarctica, Ushuaia, bits and pieces. But the good story was, what was I saying? Nice story, is when we got coming down the Chilean fields, we went to a little fishing village. Now this fishing village had about literally 100 people and about 20 or 30 kids. And they were going through tough times. Their only income was fishing. And there was some sort of bacteria in the water, and it was going through hard times. So every time the ship went by this little island, we used to stop in this island only for a couple of hours. So we'd get off the ship, get into little Zodiacs, go across to the shore and have a look around this island, which was just a tiny island with a few houses and things like that. Meanwhile, all the little kids jumped in the Zodiac, excited, went back to the ship, and they laid on pizzas for them and lots of cans of Coke. So their kids were all excited and happy. And then when we returned, the kids came back. And I think the parents as well went across, had a bit of a meal. But also, unbeknownst to you, they also dropped off big bags of clothes. And we thought, what's all this about? When we finished our cruise in Ushuaia, they said the night before, they said, you're all packing your clothes. A lot of you are going back to Australia. You don't need all your warm weather clothes. This island we've been to, if you'd like to donate your clothes, I got rid of 20 kilos of shirts and jumpers and even a pair of boots and things. So that's my good luck, good story.